Good day. Today's lecture is devoted to information and developmental teaching methods. This topic is especially important because university teaching must not only transmit knowledge, but also activate students' thinking, sustain their attention, and guide their intellectual development. Accordingly, the value of informational methods should be assessed not merely by how much material they deliver, but by how effectively they organize students' cognitive activity. Therefore, the study of these methods is essential for understanding how traditional forms of instruction may also perform a developmental function. At the outset, the lecture formulates its aim very clearly: to develop active attention and to move students' thoughts alongside the lecturer's reasoning. This is a particularly important pedagogical point. Informational teaching should not reduce students to passive listeners. On the contrary, even where knowledge is presented in completed form, instruction should still stimulate internal participation, concentration, and intellectual movement. Thus, the aim of the lecture is not simply the transfer of finished content, but the organization of purposeful cognitive engagement during that process. This slide defines information and developmental methods as those through which students receive knowledge in a finished form. Several major sources are indicated. Teacher-led methods such as lecture, story, explanation, and conversation, media-based methods, especially the educational film, and self-study sources including the textbook, study guide, and training program. This classification is pedagogically significant because it shows that the finished presentation of knowledge may occur through different channels. However, what unites them is the fact that the learner is guided through already organized content. Consequently, the teacher's task is to ensure that such content remains intellectually active rather than mechanically received. The presentation then turns to the lecture method as one of the principal informational forms. The lecture is characterized as a monological presentation of structured material. The slide also points to the importance of reference notes, visual aids, and a carefully controlled pace that allows students to take meaningful notes. Several requirements are especially important here: authorship, strict sequence, and clarity. In addition, the lecturer should mark the main ideas intonationally and formulate them briefly. Therefore, the lecture method is effective when it combines structure, emphasis, and pedagogical precision. It may also be integrated into combined classes together with checking of knowledge. This slide identifies 4 major functions of the lecture: cognitive, developmental, organizational, and co-creative. The cognitive function provides the basis for knowledge assimilation. The developmental function activates thinking and intellectual engagement. The organizational function structures learning and directs student attention. The co-creative function refers to the emotional and intellectual interaction between lecturer and audience. Taken together, these functions show that the lecture is far more than a channel of information. It is also a means of structuring attention, stimulating thought, and creating an atmosphere of shared intellectual work. The next slide formulates the main requirements of an effective lecture. It should be scientific and morally grounded, making use of evidence-based content, vivid examples, and emotionally convincing delivery. It should possess a clear structure in which the topic is transcrito logically and as a coherent whole. It must also be methodically processed, meaning that the main ideas are emphasized and conclusions are repeated in varied forms. Finally, it should use accessible language with new terms explained and supported by modern visual tools. Accordingly, an effective lecture depends not only on the lecturer's knowledge, but also on the methodological quality of presentation. This slide broadens the discussion by presenting several additional information and developmental methods: story, explanation, conversation, and educational film. Story is a monological account of events or facts, usually vivid, emotional, and artistic in form. Explanation provides core information through verbal interpretation supported by board notes, teaching aids, and student notebooks. Conversation functions dialogically, activating prior knowledge and leading students toward conclusions. The educational film serves as a visual medium through which concepts are highlighted in accordance with the curriculum. Thus, while all these methods belong to the same general group, they differ in their pedagogical mechanism and in the kind of student activity they stimulate. The comparative table on this slide offers a concise synthesis of the methods considered. It shows the main purpose of each method, the role of the teacher, the role of the student, and the expected result. The lecture provides systematic understanding through structured explanation. Story strengthens memorization through vivid narration. Explanation leads to clear comprehension of concepts. Conversation develops critical thinking through guided dialogue. Film strengthens perception through visual and verbal support. This comparative perspective is especially useful because it reveals that the teacher must choose a method not in the abstract, but in relation to the type of result expected from the learner. This slide advances a strong thesis. At the stage of presenting new material, the educational film may function as a complete substitute for the teacher. Once the viewing has taken place, the process should move directly to consolidation, assessment, and skill formation, rather than to simple retelling. This point is pedagogically significant because it shows that informational methods are capable of changing form while preserving their instructional function. At the same time, the slide reminds us that such methods remain effective only when they are pedagogically well organized and directed toward the formation of systematic knowledge and scientific thinking. The lecture then turns to the modernization of traditional informational methods. Several directions are proposed, making lectures interactive through questions and reflection, adding visual resources through multimedia and digital platforms, stimulating independent reasoning through discussion, and inspiring intellectual curiosity in relation to future professional challenges. This is a highly important conclusion. Traditional methods do not become obsolete simply because new technologies appear. Rather, they become more effective when enriched through interactive and student-centered elements. Consequently, success depends on the lecturer's competence and on the thoughtful alignment of method with educational goals. The final thematic slide summarizes the main idea of the lecture. The core methods of this group are lecture, explanation, conversation, story, and educational film. What they develop is not limited to knowledge itself. They also form attention, thinking, and intellectual activity. Their effectiveness becomes even greater when combined with interactive technology, multimedia, and student-centered approaches. Therefore, the success of informational and developmental teaching methods depends not simply on knowledge transfer, but on the teacher's creativity, competence, and methodological flexibility. In this sense, even traditional pedagogical forms remain highly relevant when they are organized in a way that inspires independent thought. Thank you for your attention. I hope this lecture has clarified the nature of information and developmental teaching methods and has shown how they may be used not only to present finished knowledge, but also to stimulate attention, thinking, and active intellectual participation.